3 days after the wedding, my daughter-in-law brought a lawyer to my kitchen and said I needed to sign a few routine documents so the family finances could be streamlined. She smiled like a hostess offering refills. The lawyer didn't smile. He placed a leather folder on my table and called me ma'am, as if he were explaining a parking ticket. I poured tea, nodded, and let them talk. The folder did not leave with them. It left with my attorney and the recording I made of the entire conversation. That was the first minute the ground shifted in my favor. But I'm running ahead. To understand why I kept silent at the wedding and why I'm still glad I did, you have to see the picture the way I lived it, frame by frame, word by word, quiet stacked on quiet until it turned into a wall. My name is Helen Avery. I'm 67 years old, a grandmother of 2 who bakes the kind of pies you can smell at the mailbox. I have a small blue car with a dent in the door from an overeager grocery cart in 2009. I collect library receipts like bookmarks, and I still write grocery lists in pencil. My husband, Daniel, used to say my neatness could calm a storm. He passed last spring. 2 weeks before he died, we were sitting on the porch watching the evening melt into that soft violet that older eyes can still tell from gray. He turned to me, and with the bluntness of a man who'd been a contractor his entire life, said, "You know that surprise my Uncle Palmer left me? The shares in that mineral company we thought were worthless? They sold again." "How much?" I asked. He stared into the lilacs and said, almost apologetically, 15. 15 what? Million. He said it like he was ashamed of the number. Like saying it too loud would wake the neighbors. Then he squeezed my hand with a pressure that meant, "We will not let this money turn our boy into a stranger. We will not let it turn us into people we don't recognize either." Daniel was gone 12 days later. The check wasn't. Neither were the papers. In that fog where grief makes every sound a mile away, our lawyer, an even-voiced woman named Mara, laid everything out. Daniel had insisted on 2 things. The funds would pass to me first, and our son, Ethan, would only see any of it if he showed he could be a steward, not a collector. The language was all revocable living trust, successor trustee, spendthrift clause, words that taste like paper. The feeling beneath them was simple: love can be generous without being naive. I did not tell Ethan. Not because I don't love him. Because I do. You'd like him. 41. Tall like his father, a smile people trust. He married Lila last Saturday. The church glowed like a lantern. Even our awkward small-town organist somehow sounded like a choir. When the officiant said, "Speak now," my mind whispered the truth about the 15 million, and my throat closed over it like a fist. Not out of fear. Out of strategy. Something I learned in the years I watched Daniel measure twice, cut once, and save the extra length for the day a board splintered. At the reception, I stayed by the second window from the left. You could see the lake through it in a perfect ribbon. The newlyweds did their first dance to a song I didn't know. Halfway through, Lila tilted her head to whisper something into Ethan's shoulder, and his face changed into the boy I'd bandaged after he fell off his bike. Lila has a way of making him feel chosen. Power often looks like comfort if you're not paying attention. Her mother, a woman with a necklace like a constellation, kept touching my arm and saying, "Isn't it wonderful?" As if I might not have noticed my own son's wedding without her commentary. When the cake was rolled out, someone announced they were so grateful to Lila's family for making this magic happen, and it was like hearing a distant radio switch to a station where your name doesn't exist. I cut my slice, ate 3 polite bites, and smiled through the compliments about how elegant my navy dress was. That dress was the last thing Daniel ever chose for me. It still had the small alteration stitch I refused to undo, just to feel something he'd touched. I kept silent. If you think silence is the same as surrender, you've never used it as a tool. After they drove off under an arch of sparklers, I went home, undid the zipper of that dress, folded it on the bed, and sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. The numbers didn't scare me. The people did. See, the summer Ethan brought Lila home for the first time, she walked in carrying not flowers, not a pie, but a binder. I noticed the tabs. Insurance. Car titles. Student loans. "I just love keeping things organized," she said brightly, and I wanted to love her for that sentence alone. Organization has held me together through every loss I've known." Then she asked 3 casual questions you only ask when you're doing inventory of a life that doesn't belong to you. "Who's on the house deed?" She chirped. "Where do you bank? Do you have a will?" I said, "Our lawyer keeps track." She said, "How smart." She meant, how inconvenient. Twice after that, she left real estate brochures on my hall table by accident. They were for the kind of single-floor townhomes with cheerful names that pretend they aren't meant for the elderly. "Just something to think about," she'd say, patting my hand with the softness people reserve for pets and kindly substitutes. I'm not foolish. I've lived long enough to know love can come with a ledger, and sometimes the only difference between care and control is who gets to sign. Still, I gave her every chance to be the woman my son believed she was. I kept silent at the wedding. On Monday morning, I made cinnamon muffins from the recipe card I've had since 1979 and watered the fern by the sink. On Tuesday, I opened my safe deposit box and put inside it the trust binder, my marriage license, the title to the house, and a small velvet bag with Daniel's father's watch. On Wednesday at 10:07 a.m., the doorbell rang. "Hi, Mom." Lila's voice rose at the end of the word, the way people sing to dogs. She stepped in before I'd invited her and kissed the air somewhere between my cheek and the space where respect should be. Behind her, a man with the hairline of a chess piece and a briefcase that probably had a birth certificate introduced himself. "Aaron Pike," he said. "Family counsel. Congratulations on your son's marriage." Pike. The name made something cold slip down my spine. Not because I knew him, because the last time a man with a briefcase and a practiced smile sat at this table, he told me my husband's time would be shorter than our hope. I moved the muffins to a cooling rack and gestured at the chairs. "Tea?" I asked. They took their seats and their roles. Lila clasped her hands as if she were leading youth group. "We've been talking," she began, "and we just want to make sure everything is in order, just to take things off your plate so you can enjoy." She smiled. "You've done so much. It's our turn to be the grown-ups." "Of course," I said. I kept my face as readable as a cloud. "The trick is not to act like you're hiding anything. The trick is to be so ordinary that people forget you even own a safe deposit box." Pike slid the folder across the table. "These are standard assignments of authority," he said. "Durable power of attorney. Healthcare directives. A family asset consolidation agreement. Your son is very responsible, and it will make it easier to manage things as you age. Think of it like moving all the books from different shelves into one library." He clicked his pen. His watch gleamed. $500 gleam, maybe more. "Whose name is on the library card?" I asked. He lifted one corner of his mouth. "Your son's. He and Lila will make sure you're comfortable." "Comfortable," Lila repeated, delighted by the word. "You won't have to worry about bills or mail or anything, really. We're a team now." I said, the way you say it when someone's recommended a casserole recipe that has gelatin in it. Pike went on, lines he'd said before to women who had worn softer cardigans than mine. "We'd also recommend retitling the house to a family LLC," he said, emphasizing the letters like charms on a bracelet. "For tax efficiency." I nodded. He tapped a page. "This last document simply clarifies that any windfalls or inheritances are family property to ensure fair distribution down the line. Many families find this prevents confusion." Lila looked at her hands. "Mom," she said softly, "I know Daniel passed and there may be stuff to sort out. I'm just trying to help." There it was. The word turned over so casually you might miss the sharp edge beneath. Stuff. $15 million as stuff. A life of careful saving and careful loving as stuff. "I appreciate the thought," I said. I poured tea. The steam rose and curled like a promise I hadn't said out loud yet. While they talked, I touched the tiny black device I'd slid under the linen runner that morning. One button, one light, a gift from my neighbor's retired son who once told me that preparation isn't paranoia, it's respect for your future self. I had slipped it into place the moment I saw Aaron Pike step out of his sedan and straighten his already straight tie. I do not like recordings. I like eye contact and the kind of memory you keep in your bones. But I like being bullied even less. Of course, Pike finished, you would remain beneficiary for life. Full support. Travel. Whatever you want. Even the little dent in my car? I asked mildly. He blinked. Lila laughed a touch too hard. She's joking, she said to him as if he were a substitute teacher. Pike pushed the pen closer. We can notarize at my office this afternoon. I cook on Wednesdays, I said. Soup day. Thursday then, Lila tried. I mop on Thursdays. Friday? Friday I visit my husband. They were learning a slow truth. The older you are, the more power a schedule has. It's not stubbornness, it's infrastructure. My mopping day says I live here on my own terms. Pike's polite patience thinned. Mrs. Avery, he said, this is all to your advantage. Hard experience has taught me that delays only create friction. While you're sound of mind, he paused there, a deliberate hanging of a lantern. It's best to put protections in place. Sound of mind, I repeated, as if tasting a new dessert. Let's be sensible then. I'll have my lawyer look these over. Lila's eyes flicked to Pike's. He slid the pen back into his case with annoyance. He did not bother to varnish. Of course, he said. But if you could avoid making any significant transfers before we formalize things. I raised one eyebrow. A trick my mother taught me that works better than a slap. Before we formalize what? The consolidation, he said. I see. I opened the folder, skimmed the pages. It takes a lifetime to look helpless while reading 5 lines ahead. The Family Asset Consolidation Agreement was not just a library. It was an eraser. Buried in a paragraph that began with, for the avoidance of doubt, they'd written that any funds received by either spouse from any source could be deemed community property for the furtherance of family stability. It named Ethan as managing member of the LLC. It gave Lila operational authority for household management, a phrase that sounds like clean towels and really means keys. I closed the folder and patted it like a sleeping pet. Thank you for bringing this, I said. Mara's office will be in touch. Lila stood too quickly. Her chair protested against the tile. Please just don't do anything, she said, and the sweetness slipped. She didn't look at my face. She stared at my hands, as if I might reach into a drawer and pull out a wire transfer. When they left, I watched them through the lace curtain. He spoke. She nodded. He gestured with the hand that wore the gleaming watch. She glanced back once at my little blue car, at its dent, and I saw a calculation she didn't hide fast enough. In another life, we might have traded recipes. In this one, she had brought a lawyer to my kitchen. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a declaration. I made a call. 2 o'clock, Mara said. Bring everything. Her office smells like eucalyptus tea and printer ink. She has a row of little plants that have somehow stayed alive under fluorescent lights, evidence of a tenacity I admire. I placed the folder on her desk and watched her face as she read. Lawyers don't gasp. Decent ones have their eyebrows trained to remain at a calm altitude. But Mara does a thing with her mouth when she's impressed by someone's audacity. Her lips pressed together. When she looked up, her voice carried the kind of warmth people reserve for chess partners who finally stop playing with their pawns. You were right to keep quiet at the wedding, she said. This is a very polite ambush. I'm old enough to know when a smile has angles, I said. She turned the pages. Power of attorney naming your son, witnessed by his wife's friend. Healthcare directive naming Lila as secondary proxy. I doubt she knows the difference between a DNR and a do not disturb sign. Family LLC with your house as the seed asset and a clause that any windfalls are swept in. And this is my favorite. She tapped a line, a non-disparagement provision. They wanted to make sure you couldn't complain about it if you woke up. I thought of Daniel's hand on mine. 15. I thought of the lilacs. I thought of the sparklers. They smelled money at a funeral, I said. It didn't come out angry. It came out like weather. Mara leaned back. Let's build a fence they can't even see. What do I do? I asked. You already did the first thing, she said. You did not sign. The second, we formalize what you and Daniel intended. We make the trust irrevocable now that you're the sole surviving grantor. We bring your sister as a co-trustee for checks and balances, and we add a protector clause naming me. We record a ladybird deed on the house, so it skips probate straight into your trust at death. We establish 529 plans for the grandchildren directly from the trust. Ella and James, yes? Yes, I said. The lemonade light that word carries came back for a moment. Grandchildren. That is why we do all this. And one more thing, Mara added, sliding a page onto a blank pad. We schedule a capacity evaluation with Dr. Vaughn. You are perfectly sound, but if they're going to whisper otherwise, we hand them certified proof before they can shape a question. I am not stepping into any doctor's office to be patronized, I said, heat flashing. Dr. Vaughn doesn't patronize, Mara said. She asks you to recite a recipe and a street map from memory. You'll run rings around her, and then we'll have a letter that stops anyone from saying, while you're of sound mind, as if it were a ticking clock. She paused. Helen, there's more. If they try this again, and they will, we invite them to a family meeting at my office. We record it. You already recorded the first pitch, it's admissible. If they push for signatures, if they lean, if they try to slide in that avoidance of doubt clause, we have not only a civil claim for undue influence, we have a neat little path to a temporary protective order if they harass you at home. I felt my shoulders drop for the first time in days. It's not that I wanted a fight. I wanted a door I could close. Will this hurt Ethan? The words tasted like pennies. I keep thinking of him at 6, arguing that ants must have birthdays too. Mara's eyes softened. We don't have to hurt anyone. Consequences aren't cruelty. Sometimes they're the only language some people understand. You will give him a chance to step out of this clean. If he chooses not to, that's his choice. And you can still love someone without letting them hold your pen. She drafted. I initialed. A courier appeared like a magic trick and disappeared with the revised trust. By 4 o'clock, Dr. Vaughn had an opening for Friday at 9. By 5, I was home again, stirring soup because even in the middle of legal fortifications a person has to eat. Thursday afternoon, Ethan called. His voice was sunny, the kind of sunshine that stings your eyes. Hey, Mom. Lila said she and Aaron stopped by to help you with some paperwork. Great, right? I don't want you fussing over mail and bills. We'll swing by tomorrow morning to pick up the signed copies. We'll swing by, I repeated quietly. Ethan, sweetheart, when did you start saying we like a job title? There was a pause long enough to hear him look at Lila. It's just easier, he said. We're married now. Congratulations, I said. I was at the wedding. He laughed, not unkindly, not kindly either. You know what I mean. We're a team. We want to take care of you. I have a doctor's appointment at 9, I said. Stop by at 11. I set the kettle on. Not because I needed more tea, but because the ritual studied the edges of the day. I took Daniel's watch out of its velvet bag and wound it the way he taught me, slow, precise, as if listening were a kind of faith. Friday morning, Dr. Vaughn asked me to recount the steps of my cinnamon muffins. Preheat to 375, I said. 1½ cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, ½ teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/3 cup of sugar, 1 egg, 1 cup of milk, 3 tablespoons of melted butter. Mix dry, mix wet, fold together, don't overwork. Batter should sigh when it hits the tin. She smiled in a way that said she'd come for my memory and stayed for my verbs. She asked me to draw a clock. I drew it like Daniel's father's watch. She asked me to recall 3 words 15 minutes later. Lilac, library, ladder, I said, and realized my mind had been arranging all week to save me. At 10:52, I was back home. At 11:03, the bell rang. Ethan first this time, ducking inside with that boyish half-apology he's used since he was 12 and late for curfew. Lila followed, composed, as if her posture had its own backbone. Aaron Pike came last, holding a notary stamp like it was a sacrament. Mom, hey, Ethan said, looking around. Where's the paperwork? We really should get this done today. In a moment, I said. We're waiting for someone. Who? Lila asked, the syllable thin as a thread. Me, Mara said from the doorway behind them. She stepped in, set her briefcase on the table with the soft authority of a person who never raises her voice because she never has to. Good morning, everyone. Before we proceed, I want to be very clear. Mrs. Avery has counsel. That's me. Anything you want her to sign will be reviewed by me. Any attempt to secure signatures without me present will be considered harassment. Are we understood? For the first time, Pike looked at someone in this room as if they might be his equal. Mara Lindell, he said, and the way he said her name told me he had Googled her and hadn't liked what he found. We're trying to organize this family's assets. As you know, that's a kind of planning we both do. And then Mara said, that elegant syllable people use to place a stone on a chessboard. What you brought Mrs. Avery were not standard forms. They were a transfer of control. She will not be signing them. What she will be doing is executing the revised terms of her existing trust, which is now irrevocable. Also, she completed a cognitive evaluation this morning. Here is Dr. Vaughn's letter. She slid a sealed envelope across the table, just in case anyone prepared to weaponize concern. Color rose under Lila's makeup. We would never. You brought a notary to a surprise, Mara said gently. You were never here for conversation. Ethan's mouth opened and closed. He looked smaller suddenly, as if someone had let a little air out of him. I wanted to reach for him. I also wanted to move my chair 3 inches away from the table to make sure everyone knew where my edges were. Pike recovered first. An irrevocable trust, he said, imposing disbelief like a test. That's awfully final. That's the point, Mara said, her tone as mild as honey and as firm as oak. Mrs. Avery has also executed a ladybird deed on her home. It remains in her name during her life. It transfers automatically to her trust upon death. No probate. No LLC. No consolidation. And to put to rest any rumors of selfishness, the grandchildren will receive educational disbursements directly from the trust, as will a charitable scholarship in Daniel Avery's name for local apprenticeships. There is more than enough kindness to go around, Mr. Pike. There is just no longer an opening for control. Silence is loud in a kitchen. You can hear the clock. You can hear your own pulse. You can hear a marriage adjusting to a new temperature. Ethan cleared his throat. Mom, we didn't mean to make you feel small, I offered. It came out gentler than I expected. I do not feel small. I feel measured. There's a difference. Lila, darling, I wanted to believe that binder of yours was just enthusiasm. But you brought a lawyer to my house. That is not enthusiasm. That is a plan. Her chin lifted, a last defense. I'm trying to protect Ethan. I've been doing that since he was the size of the loaf of bread, I said. And I will protect him now from resentment he does not need to carry. Which brings me to the part where you listen. I slid the little black device from under the runner. The light winked, steady as a heartbeat. You were recorded on Wednesday. Every word. Windfalls, family property, avoidance of doubt. You can have a copy when you send me a polite email requesting one. If anyone attempts to pressure me again, to show up unannounced with papers, to suggest I am not of sound mind, to insinuate that my grief makes me malleable, this recording becomes something a judge hears before lunch. Pike's face rearranged itself into something less certain. He folded his hands. There's no need for threats. Then consider this a boundary, Mara said. Lila opened her mouth, shut it, opened it again. So, she said finally, searching for an exit that sounded like grace, what are we supposed to do? Go be married, I said. Build your own library. You're welcome to borrow any of my books. You're not welcome to rewrite them. Ethan looked from me to Lila to the device to the folder and back to me. Mom, he said, the word longer than it used to be. He stopped. The space after that we was a cliff. People can climb back from cliffs. I've seen it. Mara packed her case. One more thing, she said, almost as an afterthought. Mrs. Avery is willing to consider a family meeting next week to discuss a stipend for the newlyweds' first year, conditional on respect and boundaries. If you're interested, send me your availability. If not, we will proceed without you. Lila's eyes sharpened. The cleverness that first attracted and then alarmed me rose like a periscope. Conditional how? She asked. Conditional like adults, Mara said. No surprises. No notarized ambushes. No treating a widow's house like a lobby. Conditional like gratitude sent in full sentences. They left. It took them longer to walk to their car than it had on Wednesday. I watched through the lace curtain because it is my window and I'm allowed to. The lake looked like a ribbon again. Someone had taken a canoe out, You could see it pulsing toward the far shore with the patience that makes movement look like stillness. I sat down. I touched the watch. I breathed. Then I opened the safe deposit key box and slid it back into its little velvet sleeve. 15 had never felt so quiet. It was not over. Of course it wasn't. People don't abandon control after one door closes. They look for a window, then a vent, then a crack near the baseboard and whisper through it until you forget you can patch it with something stronger than paint. On Sunday, after church, I found a note tucked under my wiper blade. The paper was expensive and the handwriting wasn't Ethan's. It wasn't Lila's either. 3 lines. Mrs. Avery, please be advised your late husband's inheritance may be subject to equitable distribution under community property principles once subsumed in family use. We strongly urge you to reconsider. Respectfully. A.P. I laughed, a sound even I didn't recognize. Not cruel, delighted. He had written subsumed. He had written urge. He had left a paper trail on my windshield. At noon, I set my kettle on. At 12:03, I called Mara and read her the note. We proceed, she said. They've told us who they are. Let's tell them who you are. By Monday, she'd scheduled the family meeting. Not at her office this time. At a place with unambiguous furniture, a conference room at the bank where Daniel had opened his first account with $22 and a grin. The manager still remembered him. Best customer we ever had, he said, shaking my hand across a desk the color of good coffee. Built everything slow and paid on time. Then let's do this slow, I said. And on time. The meeting was set for Thursday at 10. Bring nothing to sign, Mara wrote in the email. Only yourselves. Wednesday night, I set 2 things beside my purse, the velvet watch bag and a single sheet of paper in Daniel's handwriting, creased along the lines where we had read and reread it at the porch table. He had written it the night we said 15 on the porch. In case I go first, he had said, shy like a boy, proud like a man who has learned that money is only loud when it's in the wrong room. It wasn't a will. It wasn't even legally necessary. It was a roadmap for love. He had left a sentence for our son that I had not yet shown anyone. At 9:58, Lila and Ethan walked into the bank. Lila had dressed like someone attending an interview she already believed she'd won. Ethan had shaved too close and the skin below his jaw was pink. Pike arrived at 9:59 with a face like a clock that had decided to be late just to prove it could. He carried a slimmer folder this time. Before we start, I said, and I felt the weight of the watch like an anchor that also knew how to float, I want to read you something. I took out the page and flattened it with my palm. Daniel's letters weren't pretty. They were square and sure, the kind that looked like they could hold weight. Dear Helen, I read, voice steady. And if I'm gone when you read this, dear Ethan. Money is a tool. It's not an apology and it's not a scoreboard. We were poor and we were happy because we knew where we stood with each other. If this money comes and I am not here to laugh at the number with you, do something for me. Make it heavy with usefulness. Make it light in your hands. And tell our boy that nothing he signs should make him forget the sound his mother makes when she is laughing in our kitchen. If he does forget, stop him. Love, D. I looked up. Ethan was not looking at the paper. He was looking at me. Lila reached for his hand under the table. Pike cleared his throat, ready to pivot, to praise the sentiment and then guide it toward his streamlined plans. And that is where everything turned. Because when you bring a lawyer to a grandmother's kitchen and she pours you tea instead of pouring you out, you think the day belongs to you. When she waits 3 days, you think she is soft. When she reads you a letter in her husband's square hand, you think you've been invited to a nostalgia you can sit through politely on your way to signatures. What arrived instead was a different kind of paper. Mara placed a thin stack in front of Pike. Mr. Pike, we're filing these at 1 p.m., unless you and your clients agree, on the record, to cease all attempts to consolidate Mrs. Avery's assets and to refrain from approaching her without counsel. You can read them now. They're not long. He scanned. He did not smile. A temporary protective order draft. A complaint for undue influence ready to file if they crossed the line again. A notice to preserve all communications related to family asset consolidation, including texts and emails, under penalty of spoliation sanctions if destroyed. Lila's lips parted, startled not by the content. She didn't speak the language of sanctions, but by the tone in the room. It had shifted from persuasion to architecture. This was a room where beams were measured, not feelings. Ethan swallowed. He looked at me, and for a moment I saw the boy with the skinned knee and the apology already forming before the tear. "Mom," he said, and his voice dropped its sunshine, "I didn't know about the windfall clause. I didn't read it all." "I know," I said. "You trusted someone to bring you a library when they'd packed an eraser." Lila flinched like I'd slapped her. "How dare?" "You dared first," I said, and I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't need to. You dared to come into my house with a stranger's stamp and a folder that named my life confusion. You dared to call 15 million family property before you called it what Daniel called it, a tool. You dared to mistake my silence for permission." The room held still. The bank manager closed the door softly from the outside, as if preserving a museum piece that must not be disturbed. Pike reached for a line. "We can discuss boundaries without threats," he said. "If you're willing to consider a stipend for the newlyweds." "I am," I said. "And I'll discuss it with my attorney and my son. You're welcome to wait in the lobby." He blinked. The word lobby, delivered with the spiritual weight of a grandmother who has practiced both welcome and threshold all her life, landed with more force than a sheriff's badge. He stood. Lila didn't. "Ethan," she said quietly, as if we were alone, "if we leave now, we get nothing." Ethan looked at her hand on his. He looked at the page in my hand. He looked at the clock on the wall and maybe at the kind of time he wanted to live inside. "Maybe," he said, "we get something else." And because stories don't change in one meeting, but sometimes they tilt, he did something I hadn't planned for. He took his hand out from under hers, breathed, and said, "Mom, what do you want the stipend to look like?" I felt Daniel's watch like a pulse against my palm. Across the table, Lila's face went from surprise to calculating to something I had not seen on her before, careful. "Our conditions are simple," Mara said for me, not because I couldn't speak, but because sometimes the best gift an advocate gives is the relief of not having to be both mother and negotiator. No contact without counsel when finances are discussed. No access to Mrs. Avery's mail, accounts, or property. A written acknowledgement that inheritance funds are separate property of the trust and not marital funds of Ethan and Lila. And one human condition: gratitude. Real sentences. Real presence. Not the paper kind. Lila opened her mouth, closed it, then finally did the thing I had not imagined she could do. She said, "Okay." She didn't say it sweetly. She didn't say it with tears. She said it like a woman who had seen a door close and decided to walk through a different one rather than pound her fists bloody on wood. Mara slid a blank page across the table. "Write it down," she said. "Start with 'we acknowledge' and make sure your pen knows the difference between want and need." I watched Lila grip the pen. The first sentence came slower than anything I'd ever seen her do. "We acknowledge that Helen Avery's assets, including any inheritances, are her sole property," she wrote, and the words looked awkward in her hand, like a dress one size too honest. "We agree not to approach her about finances without counsel present. We understand and accept the boundary." I watched my son read over her shoulder. He did not correct a word. He put his palm flat on the page and pressed, the way a boy presses a leaf into a book. "Good," Mara said softly. "Now sign your names." She looked at me. She didn't have to say the rest out loud. This is not forgiveness. This is structure. We were not done. But we had placed the first beam. And then, because life, like good architecture, loves a twist, Aaron Pike cleared his throat and said, "There's one more issue we should discuss." He produced a thin envelope and slid it to my side with practiced delicacy. "It concerns the title to your late husband's cabin by the lake." I picked up the envelope. The paper inside was a photocopy of a deed I recognized and a paragraph with a date I didn't. 2 months before he died, Daniel had signed a quitclaim deed transferring the old cabin into my name alone. He had tucked it into our file with a sticky note I'd overlooked, on which he had written, So you have the place where we first learned to argue and laugh and fix doors with too many screws. But there was another document in the envelope, something filed by someone else last week, asserting family right of access to the cabin based on customary use and implied easement. The signature at the bottom made my stomach ice and then burn. It was not Lila's. It was my sister's. By sunset that same day, my sister stood on the cabin porch with a deputy, insisting the lake remembered her name. It did. Unfortunately for her, it also remembered the difference between a guest and a trespasser. The envelope in the bank conference room had felt heavier than paper ought to. Implied easement, customary use, family right of access. Signed, A.P. Your sister filed this? Mara asked, scanning the page. The signature says A.P., I said. My sister is June. The P is wrong. Mara's eyes narrowed in the way wildfire fighters squint at wind. Aaron Pike, she said. Lila's lawyer, I answered. Not your sister's lawyer, she corrected softly. But someone's. We'll confirm. For now, assume an alliance. I didn't curse. Not because I'm saintly. Because my mother used to say that anger is a spice. Use a pinch, not a cup. I folded the copy, slid it back into the envelope, and put that envelope into my purse the way you put a match where it can't strike unintentionally. The cabin is where Daniel taught Ethan to skip stones and where June once borrowed a cooler and returned it 3 summers later as a planter. It sits at the end of a washboard road where cell service pretends to be shy. In spring, the birches along the shoreline are the color of promises. In winter, the wind talks through the eaves. When Daniel started chemo, he made me promise to keep it even if we sold everything else, so you'll have a place where the grief can go outside, he said, and I'd laughed because he could make anything sound like it had a door. We kept it. We also planned for it. 2 months before he died, he signed a quitclaim deed, the cabin and the half-acre around it in my name alone. He tucked that deed into a file with a sticky note that said, for argument and laughter. June had always loved the cabin for its porch, for the way the neighbors always had extra sugar, for the cool that rose off the water like forgiveness, even on days that didn't deserve it. She loved it with the urgency of a person who did not want to build anything of her own if a key could be borrowed instead. When Mara and I left the bank, she made 3 calls between the sidewalk and her car. One to the county recorder to confirm the deed timeline, one to a title attorney she trusts, and one to a process server whose voice sounded like corduroy. If they intend to make this a legal conversation, she said, tucking her phone away, we will teach them the vocabulary. What exactly is an implied easement? I asked, though I knew enough to be offended. An easement, you get to use someone else's property, usually because the property used to be one parcel and the use existed before the split. It can also be implied by long-term use if it was open and obvious and necessary, and, this is the important part, hostile. In other words, without permission. June never did anything without asking, I said. She always asked. She just forgot to hear no. Mara smiled. Permission is a permission slip that never expires. The moment we prove she used the cabin with permission, any claim of hostility collapses. We'll also file a notice of no easement so the bank's title records aren't polluted by her filing. I'll draft an affidavit of permissive use for you and for the neighbors to sign. Then, because we are thorough, we'll record a revocation of license, just to make it plain that any past permission is revoked as of today. What if she shows up before the ink dries? Then you call me. And if she brings a deputy, you smile and hand him the deed. Civil matter. He'll tell her to leave. What if she brought Pike too? Then I bring a court reporter and a tape measure, Mara said, which is her way of saying, I am not afraid of their furniture. The cabin road was exactly as I remembered it. Ruts where the ice had breathed and buckled, wild raspberries in the ditch turning their faces toward September, a mailbox I'd meant to repaint the summer Daniel got sick. I parked under the maple that drops its leaves in a way that looks like a slow parade, and I stood for a moment with my hand on the hood, feeling the engine tick in small, cooling clicks. The porch steps creaked the way they always had. That creak is a comfort when it's your own house. It's an accusation when you're not sure who might be listening. Inside, it smelled like cedar and old paper and the last coffee we'd brewed here in the spring. I ran my hand along the mantle and came away with dust and the kind of peace I think only people who've washed grief out of a mug can understand. On the table was the guest log I'd kept mostly as a joke, a spiral notebook with, if you break it, you fix it. If you use it, you wash it. If you sleep here, leave a line in this book. June's handwriting showed up 6 times over the last 10 years. Thank you, borrowed the canoe. Thank you, used the grill. Thank you, took the last of the pancake mix, will replace. She had signed her name every time with a heart instead of a dot on the I, as if punctuation could smuggle meaning past a guard. I took pictures of each entry with my phone. I texted them to Mara. Within a minute, my phone pinged. Perfect. Permission. Save the originals. I found the spare lock sets Daniel had labeled in his distinct contractor's print front, back, boathouse, and set them on the counter. I changed too and left the boathouse alone, because there is something about leaving one door untouched that makes a person feel like herself. Then, I took the trail camera he'd set up at the edge of the path, mostly to admire the deer and once to catch a raccoon he named Senator, and I replaced the memory card with a new one. Preparations aren't paranoia, our neighbor's retired son had said. They're respect for your future self. I was halfway through writing a note to the neighbors, if anyone other than me or Ethan is here, please call, when a car I recognized by its sound and the way it kissed the brakes came up the drive. June's hatchback. Behind it, a county cruiser that looked patient in the way only official vehicles can look. June stepped out with composure she had probably practiced in her mirror. She wore a linen shirt the color of optimism and sunglasses as large as drama. The deputy was younger than she is and wore his professionalism like a pressed shirt. Hell, June said, using the nickname only she uses, the way people say your name loudly when they want to own the room. You should have called. I did, I said. Mara. The deputy nodded to me. Afternoon, ma'am. We got a call about a property access dispute. I'm here to make sure it stays civil. It will, I said. This is a civil matter. Exactly, June said brightly. Which is why I brought the filing. She held up a manila folder like a stage prop and slid out a copy of the implied easement notice, complete with A, P, at the bottom instead of her own initials. I'm not trying to start a fight, I'm trying to avoid one. I've used the cabin every summer since, well, since forever. Dan always said what's his is family's. Dan also said, June, if you take my hammer, return it in the century you borrowed it, I answered. I took the deed from my purse and handed it to the deputy. Ma'am, sir, I said, equal to both of them. 2 months before my husband died, he conveyed this property into my name alone. This is the recorded deed. Whatever my sister enjoyed here before was with permission. That permission is revoked. We'll be filing a notice of no easement today. The deputy read the deed, then the filing, then the deed again. He was the kind of man who respects paper more than posture. MS. June, he said, turning to her, this is a civil dispute. I can't enforce a paper you filed if it's contested. Today, without a court order, I can only keep the peace. I'm going to ask you to leave. She wasn't ready for that. She had expected to be coddled into occupancy. You're just going to take her side, she said, pointing to me as if I were something her hand had discovered under a sink. No, ma'am, he said gently. I'm going to take the side of the law. Talk to your attorney. That word attorney slid into the space between us like a wedge. June, I said quietly, who prepared your filing? She paused, then did that corner of the mouth shrug she uses when she's about to lie without calling it lying. A friend. A.P. I said. Aaron Pike. Silence polished the porch for a heartbeat. Then she said, too casually, he gave me a template. You brought a lawyer into my kitchen and then into my sister's folder, I said, more to myself than to her. That's not a coincidence. That's a campaign. Her sunglasses hid her eyes. Her mouth hid nothing. I have debts, she said, surprising us both. Medical. The medical debt was paid last year, I said. I wrote the check. You sent a thank you that said, love you to the moon. You forgot the return trip. She flinched and took a breath. You don't understand, she tried again. Help me, I said. And I meant the words. I am not made of iron. I am made of old wood and recipes and the kind of love that still reaches when it shouldn't. She pressed her lips together. I saw the choice in her face, confession or escalation. She chose the latter. If you won't recognize a right, the court will, she said, grabbing at a sentence she had probably heard from A.P., and if you lock me out, that's retaliation. The deputy shook his head politely. That's not how it works, ma'am. She left. Not dramatically. Not meekly. She left like a person who believed the next door would open even if this one didn't. The deputy tipped his hat. Ma'am, he said, I've got to log this visit. Do you want me to note she was asked to leave? Yes, I said. Paper was becoming our second language. As his cruiser rolled back down the lane, I sat on the porch and watched the water argue politely with the wind in the reeds and thought about the shape of a fight. I don't want to be in one. I also do not want to lose by failing to admit that I already am. My phone buzzed. A text from Mara. Recorder confirms deed clear. Title attorney drafting affidavit of permissive use. Need neighbor statements. Also, Pike's signature shows on filing metadata. He prepared it. Why? I typed. She replied immediately. He's betting on pressure. If you cave on the cabin, the trust looks soft. I wrote back, then we make it harder. Agreed, she wrote. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office. Wear comfortable shoes. Why? I asked. Because we are going to walk through your history, she answered. And then we are going to build a wall out of it. When Mara says wall, she means a narrative with exhibits. She means declarations from neighbors who've eaten my blueberry muffins on that porch since 1997, photos of June with a canoe weed labeled borrowed, guestbook pages with the word thanks circled in ink. She means my hand-drawn map of who used the cabin when, annotated with lines like, Thanksgiving 2008, June asks for permission to bring friends, yes, Helen said, but no fireworks. A judge doesn't only read law, a judge reads a story and then decides which one makes the fullest sense. In Mara's conference room the next morning, we laid everything out like a quilt. Tell me the first time June used the cabin without you, she said. I told her. Tell me the last time Daniel told her no, she said. I told her. She asked for adjectives. I gave her verbs instead. She arrived, I said. She requested. She borrowed. She announced. She sighed. She promised. Every one of those verbs takes permission like a shadow. At noon, her paralegal returned with 2 neighbor statements. At one, the old fisherman across the cove who uses the word ma'am like punctuation wrote that June always asked if she could use the boathouse. Sometimes she brought pie. Once she didn't bring it back. He had added a smiley face. I almost cried into my tea. At one, I did cry. Not because of a document. Because of a picture the paralegal found on my own social media from 3 summers ago, June on my porch, holding a mug with my kitchen in the background, captioned, borrowed my sister's favorite mug for sunrise. Don't tell her. If she'd had a right, she wouldn't have had to borrow. This is over, Mara said, not as a boast, as a diagnosis. They can object and posture, but the law is gravity. They can only defy it in their heads. Then why do I still feel like I'm standing in a high wind? I asked. Because there's another gust coming, she said. And we're going to face that one now. She laid 2 emails side by side. Both from addresses that weren't mine. One was from June to an address that looked like a construction company, the other from Aaron Pike to that same address. Both used the word rental. Both used the word monetize. Both used dates that lined up with the day June turned the key to the cabin last spring to air it out for you, and then misplaced the key for a month. She tried to list my cabin, I said. She tried to leverage your grief, Mara corrected. We'll add this to the file. Now we set the next move. What's that? We don't just defend. We change the game. You told me Daniel wanted the cabin to have purpose. Yes. Then, let's give it one that makes it useless to anyone looking to harvest cash. She slid a brochure across the table from a local land trust whose board is comprised of volunteers who know the names of the birds and the tax code. We place a conservation covenant on the property that prohibits commercial use in perpetuity. You retain full use for your life, and the trust retains it thereafter for the benefit of, say, school kids and veterans groups. That way, even if June screams until the birches learn her lyrics, the cabin cannot be rented, flipped, or used to pay anyone's debt. Even mine? I asked. She smiled at me. A real smile this time, not the courtroom kind. Even yours, she said. Which is the point. You and Daniel wanted the cabin to be heavy with usefulness and light in your hands. This does both. I took the brochure and ran my finger over a little photo of 9-year-olds holding clipboards on a dock. He would have liked that, I said. He would have made a corny joke about frogs. Then we will honor him in amphibian, she said. We did not tell June. We did not tell Pike. We filed the notice of no easement at 2. At 3, I met the land trust director on the porch and walked him around, pointing out the tree where the owls sit and the corner where the steps always collect leaves, not because anyone put them there, but because the wind makes baskets out of corners. He talked in sentences that began with stewardship and ended with third-grade units. He said, "We can move quickly if you want." I said, "I want." The next morning, the wind arrived. June showed up at 9 with a man I recognized not from my life, but from my brother-in-law's stories, the kind of man who calls himself a friend until someone owes him money. He stayed in the car, engine running. June stayed outside the gate and called my name as if we were children playing hide and seek and I was being unfair by choosing a good hiding place. "Hell," she said, lower now, as if we were already in the confidences part of the day, "I need access to the boathouse to retrieve my—" "Nothing in that boathouse is yours," I said. She swallowed, then tried a different tack. "I know you think I did something bad," she said, saying the word bad like a child again, "but I didn't bring that lawyer into your kitchen. Lila did." "I know," I said. "And you brought him here?" Her face did a small thing then, a quiver at the corner of the mouth that reminded me she is made of the same childhood I am. Then it hardened. "If you take this from me," she said, and the grammar of that sentence told me everything, "I'll take you to court until the day you die." "Then I'll be very old in court," I said. "And I will bring a book." Her friend revved the engine and glared at me like a sport he hadn't agreed to play. I took the little black device from my pocket, the one that records, without pretending to be secret about it, and set it gently on the porch rail in plain view. "June," I said, "I love you. I do not lend you keys anymore. Go home." She went. Not because of the device. Because she could hear the part of my voice that had closed the door. People who see boundaries as rudeness don't know what a grace they can be. At noon, Mara and I signed the conservation covenant. The land trust director shook my hand with both of his and said, "Your husband would be proud." I believed him. At 2, Ethan called. "Mom," he said, voice careful, "Lila wants to take you to lunch to apologize." "If she wants to apologize, she can write a letter," I said. "Spoken apologies evaporate when the next wind comes." "I think she will," he said quietly. "She cried last night." "I cried too," I said. "In 1993 when you told me you'd run away, and I found you behind the garage with a sandwich because you got hungry. Tears don't make contracts." He laughed, just once, a small real sound. "I remember the sandwich," he said. Then, after a breath, "I'm coming by tonight. Alone. I want to talk about jobs and distance." "Come," I said. And I meant it. My love for him is an ocean with storms and ports and the kind of currents only mothers can chart. At 4, the land trust sent the recorded covenant. At 5, June sent a text that said only, "You will regret this." At 5:05, the retired neighbor's son who gifted me the recorder stopped by with a bag of screws and a look that said he'd installed enough cameras to know when to place another. "Trail cam picking up anyone?" he asked. "I haven't checked," I said. "Want to be the person who pulls the card?" He grinned. We walked to the edge of the trees where the camera hides like a patient bird. He popped the old card, slid in a new one, and we took the old card inside to the laptop that still has Daniel's sawdust in the keyboard. The first images were deer, of course. One raccoon. A fox that posed better than a model. Then, just before dusk the night before, a human figure in a baseball cap, moving like caution had a gait. He walked the curve of the driveway, paused at the porch post where the key box used to hang, reached up with gloved fingers, found nothing, and then stepped to the window to peer in. "Can we zoom?" I asked. The neighbor's son clicked and the pixels arranged themselves into a face that had been careful about the angles, but careless about the nose. It wasn't June. It was Aaron Pike. I exhaled and then inhaled twice more, a grandmother's version of a siren. He came himself, I said. He came at dusk looking for a key that didn't exist. The neighbor's son whistled. You want that saved in 3 places? Yes, I said. And then I want to teach our friend A.P. the meaning of spoliation if he pretends he was never here. Mara watched the clip an hour later and her eyes did that pleased mouth thing again. Trespass gets him a stern letter, she said. Attempted access after hours with gloves gets him something better, a request for a protective order with a clip that makes a judge wonder what else he'd do if no one was watching. We'll file in the morning. And we'll CC the Bar Association on our correspondence. Will it end this? I asked. It will shorten it, she said. And length is what they trade on. At 6, Ethan came. He stood in my doorway the way he did when he was 17, hopeful, sorry, hungry. He looked around at the folders and the kettle and the empty chair that was his father's and put his hand on the back of it as if it could steady all of us. I took a job, he said. Out of state. Good money. Honest work. I can't tell if I'm running away or walking toward. Both, I said. That's how most journeys start. Lila says it's too soon. She wants to be near her mother. Your wife can visit her mother, I said. You can visit your spine. He smiled. We made soup. I told him about the covenant. He told me about a conversation with Lila that had gone sideways, and then somehow right, where she had realized that feelings aren't a currency the rest of us have to accept on sight. He told me she had written the start of a letter, and then ripped it up, and then started again. Tell her the paper matters, I said. Not because I'm old and prefer paper, but because words you commit to are the ones you're willing to meet again later. At 9, I slept at the cabin for the first time since spring. I set the recorder on the nightstand. I put Daniel's watch beside it. I dreamed of owls that laughed and judges who asked the right questions and June as a teenager again, back when she still borrowed sweaters and returned them warm from the dryer because she liked the smell. In the morning, we filed. The clip of Pike under the eaves went into a folder labeled chronology, cabin, visits, and the affidavit of permissive use went into a folder labeled June, history, permission. The conservation covenant went into its own proud folder labeled Daniel, purpose. At noon, Pike called Mara's office and asked, without humor, if we really intended to escalate a misunderstanding. Mara said, we really intend to protect a widow and her property. If you cross her threshold without notice again, you'll meet a deputy who doesn't smile, and so will your bar number. He hung up. At 3, a certified letter arrived from June that had clearly been written by someone who knew how to weaponize stationery. Notice of intent to seek judicial recognition of access rights, it read, and then, failure to accommodate reasonable use will force me to disclose certain facts about our family history that you may prefer remain private. I read it once. Then twice. Then a third time until the threat tasted like what it was, stale. Secrets lose half their poison when you say their names in daylight. What facts? Ethan asked when I showed him the letter. She's bluffing, I said. And even if she isn't, there's nothing in our past that has to be held like dynamite. Your father drank too much once when his father died and slept in the truck. I told him if he did that twice I'd take the keys. He didn't do it twice. I once borrowed Grandma's wedding earrings and lost one in the grass and didn't tell her for a week because I found it in a molehill and thought a miracle had saved me from confession. June once dated a man who yelled at her reflection. I fed her soup and told her to leave. That's not scandal. That's life. He laughed, relief bending at the edges. Grandma's earring, he said. Flat gold with a nick from 1942, I said. The mole gave it back. We set a hearing date on the protective order. At the same time, the land trust set a date for a small ceremony to announce the covenant. A group of third graders would come in October to plant native flowers along the path. I said I'd bring muffins. The director said the kids were on a health kick and could I do low sugar. I said I could make a muffin that tasted like a poem without being a dessert. 2 days before the hearing, the neighbor's son knocked on my door with the trail cam card in his hand and a look you don't get from deer. More? I asked. Different, he said. We loaded the card and clicked through a sequence of images that were all knee, elbow, cap, blur. Then a clear frame. Not June. Not Pike. A woman in a crisp jacket with a bag that had the posture of money paused at the edge of the porch, looked once over her shoulder like a person who is used to cameras, and slipped a white envelope under my mat. "Zoom?" I asked. He zoomed. The camera gave us sharpness like a gift. The woman wasn't a stranger. It was Lila's mother. We went to the porch together and lifted the mat. White envelope. No name. Inside, a single typed page that said, "We can help you resolve these family complications amicably and discreetly. My son-in-law's boss is on the hospital board. A community can be kind or forgetful. Let's be kind." It was signed with her full name, as if the courtesy would make me forget what kindness isn't. I'd thought the wind had died down. It had not. It was simply circling back to gather speed. Mara read the letter half an hour later and snorted in a way I had not yet had the privilege to hear. "Hospital board," she said. "I didn't realize we were threatening grandmothers with access to bake sales." "She thinks the word board scares me," I said. "Then let's give her a word that should scare her," Mara said. "Tortious interference." "English," I said. "Trying to mess with your relationships to get you to do things with your property. It's not a game she wants to play on paper." "She put it on paper," I said, holding up the letter. "Then we will frame it," she said. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with 3 piles, June, Pike, and the mother-in-law who signed her letters with a flourish and the word kind. I made tea. I took out the page Daniel had written about money being a tool and not a scoreboard. I looked at the watch. I opened a new yellow legal pad and wrote, at the top, in big square letters like his plan. Hearing. Protective order. Do not let Pike make my porch his after-hours office. Kevin. Covenant announced publicly. Invite the teacher who taught Ethan fractions. Kids plant flowers. Take pictures. Paper again. June. Offer help that doesn't include keys, a check to her doctor, paid directly. A list of low-interest credit counselors. A chair at my table for soup on Wednesdays if she leaves the folder at home. Lila. Require the letter. Require the gratitude. Require the pause before the next move. Mother-in-law. Send a response through Mara that says, "We do kind here. We do not do hush." At the bottom I wrote, also in square letters, "I am not prey." The hearing came on a Tuesday. The judge wore a tie with oranges on it, which calmed me more than it should have. Pike arrived without the gleam watch and with a haircut that apologized for itself. June sat 2 rows back, hands folded, face forward, the linen optimism shirt swapped for a blazer borrowed from someone who wanted to be taken seriously. Lila's mother did not attend. She sent a letter. It was marked for the record and placed under a pile. Mara stood and said the words you say when you are asking a court for a simple thing, safety. She played the clip. The courtroom watched Pike, in gloves, at dusk, reaching for a key that wasn't there. She called the deputy who had asked June to leave. He said the words you say when you are an honest man in a uniform. I told her it was a civil matter and to leave the premises. She did. Mara handed up the deed, the guest book pages with thanks circled, the neighbor's statements. She didn't speak long. She didn't need to. Gravity. Pike stood and attempted to make dusk sound like daylight. "I was there to confirm an access point," he said. He tried to melt the word glove into something called caution. He tried to shape his presence as neighborly proactive concern. The judge looked at the tie with oranges, then at the clip, then at Pike, and said, "Mr. Pike, dusk is not business hours and gloves are not neighborly." The gallery didn't laugh. Courtrooms don't. But June's shoulders fell by half an inch. The judge signed the order. No uninvited visits. No communications without counsel. No further attempts to access the property. He added, almost as an aside, and counsel would be wise to remember that the court appreciates daylight in all senses. Outside, June waited for me under the courthouse steps where people go to make last appeals. "Hell," she said, soft again. "I'm in trouble." "Tell me," I said. "Royce," she whispered. "I owe him. If I don't make a payment by Friday, he'll take my car. Then I can't get to work. Then I lose the job. Then you spiral," I said. "Yes," she said. I thought if I could use the cabin for a few weekends, I could catch up. He said he had listings ready. He said he'd handle the keys. He? I asked. She looked at the square of blue sky framed by courthouse stone and said, A.P. He's not a rental agent, I said. He knows people, she said. He knows pressure, I said. June, I will not hand you the cabin. I will hand you a rope. I reached into my bag and took out a folded paper. Here is a check made out to your clinic. Here is a counselor who will speak to the bank about a consolidation loan at a rate that is not robbery. Here is my Wednesday soup chair. Here are also my terms. You will not speak to A.P. again. If you do, you will not speak to me again until your hair turns naturally white and you have learned the difference between help and leverage. She took the paper. She cried the way some people leak, as if their roofs are old but serviceable. I hate you, she said. Then I love you. Then I hate you. I know, I said. Bring bread on Wednesday. That afternoon, the land trust posted the announcement about the cabin. They put up a picture of me in my navy dress, not because it matched the trees, but because the photographer liked the way my chin lifted when I spoke about third graders learning the names of leaves. The comments filled with people listing memories of field trips, of old cabins that had been turned into something that lasted longer than one family's argument. That is also paper. Community paper. It breaks certain spells. That evening, a courier arrived with a thick envelope. On the return, a name I'd learned not to underestimate, Lila. Inside, a letter in pen that started with I am sorry, and then continued for 4 pages without rationalizations, without passive terms, without weaponized tears. On page 2 she wrote, I like control because it feels like safety. I tried to turn you into a door I could bolt. It was wrong. On page 3 she wrote, Aaron no longer represents us. We have retained a new attorney whose first question to us was, what does your mother-in-law want? And whose second was, what do you deserve? He told us those are different questions. On page 4 she wrote, please trust me slowly. I will not ask you to trust me fast. She included a typed acknowledgement, signed by both of them, of the boundaries Mara had set. She included a paragraph for the grandchildren. She included a small photo of her mother from 1983, laughing in a kitchen with her hair pinned up with a pencil and a cake lopsided on the counter. She used to be fun, she wrote, almost as a prayer. I don't know how to find that version again. I may fail, but I will stop sending envelopes. I set the letter beside Daniel's watch and the map of the lake that still has the coffee ring from 2002. I made tea. I cried. The kind that washes a day away and leaves the floor clean. I did not think the wind had entirely died, though. People who've learned that threats get doors open have to stand outside in the weather for a while before they stop knocking. On Thursday, the neighbor's son brought me another card from the trail cam. Last one, he said with a grin. It's good. We loaded it and clicked through. At midnight 2 nights ago, a different figure had walked the edge of the property and paused at the sign the land trust had bolted into the ground. Conservation Covenant, NO commercial use, educational access only. The figure took a picture of the sign. Then, and this is what made the neighbor's son grin, she put her hand to her mouth, not to cover it, but to laugh. Then she turned to the camera and waved as if she knew it was there, and as if the joke had finally landed in the right room. It was Lila. The next frame showed a handwritten note stuck under a rock on the porch. I will bring the third graders muffins. Low sugar. Sincerely, a person learning to be on the right side of paper. I doubled over with laughter I hadn't met in months. Not because it relieves anything permanently. Because sometimes the body needs to be reminded what joy costs and why you keep paying. I sent the clip to Mara. She did not snort. She wrote, good, then, we are not done. But this is how done looks when it's on the correct road. One more gust was coming. I could feel it the way old houses feel storms before the barometer moves. It arrived wrapped not in legal language or in dusk, but in lace. An invitation slid through my mail slot on Friday with a weight that belonged to weddings or funerals or parties where wine is described by people who have memorized fruit adjectives. Lila's mother, it read, cordially invites you to a gathering at her home to celebrate family resilience. I laughed until I was tired. Then I noticed the small embossed line at the bottom, special announcement regarding community partnerships. Mara raised one eyebrow so high I thought it might detach. She's going to try to buy herself a reputation off of your cabin, she said. Then we will bring chairs, I said. and a camera, and Daniel's watch, and a letter that tastes like truth. Because here is the thing about storms, you can close your shutters and hope they pass, or you can build a channel and guide the water where it will do some good. We had built channels. Now we would test them. The night of the party, I put on the navy dress Daniel had chosen. I tucked his letter into my purse. I slid the little recorder in beside it. Ethan picked me up in a shirt that fit right. Lila met us at the door of her mother's house with eyes that said she had rehearsed and a spine that said she would not perform. The living room glittered crystal, laughter, a pianist who knew how to make money sound like taste. Lila's mother took the center of the rug in a dress that had opinions and said the words I had expected: kindness, community, quiet donations, compassion. Then she gestured to a slideshow that began, neatly, with a photo of a cabin by a lake. Our family, she announced, has partnered with a local trust to protect this precious community asset. We believe in doing good without fanfare, but tonight, in these trying times, we hope to inspire others to join us. I stepped forward before the applause could learn its lines. I'm Helen, I said. The widow whose cabin that is. The person who signed that covenant. The one who will be making the muffins. The room stopped as if I had yanked the plug out of a very expensive bathtub. Lila's mother blanched and smiled at the same time, a trick only the deeply practiced can manage. Of course, she said. We're so grateful. Grateful is the word, I said. It has a meaning. It sounds like, thank you for letting us be part of something you created, not, we created something and we're letting you stand next to it. I'm delighted you're delighted. I am not your backdrop. There are kinds of humiliation you can recover from with grace. Being corrected by a grandmother with a calm voice in a navy dress in front of a pianist is not one of them. Lila's mother opened her mouth and then did something shocking. She closed it. She nodded. Once. Twice. Small. Real. Applause rose. Not the brittle kind. The good kind, the kind that says a room has chosen to be better than its first instinct. Lila took the mic her mother had intended to keep and said, My mother is learning, like I am, that kindness without honesty is just decoration. Thank you, Helen, for letting us learn loudly and in public. We will bring muffins. She glanced at me and I almost laughed again. I took Daniel's letter out of my purse and, because a room with crystal and piano can hold a single square page from a contractor as well as any donor plaque, I read the line about money being a tool. When I finished, you could hear the ice shift in the glasses. After, in the small hush that forms near coat racks where truth lingers to cool down, Lila's mother approached me alone. Her jewelry made small, embarrassed noises. I will not send you envelopes again, she said. I will write checks to the land trust and not put my name on the newsletter. I was trying to fix something I broke by pretending it was a vase and not a window. Windows are good, I said. They let light in. She looked at Lila across the room, talking to the pianist about low-sugar set lists. She's better than me, she said softly, and it didn't sound like defeat. It sounded like a recipe lesson. We walked out under a sky that had decided to be kind to my hair. Ethan took my elbow the way men in old movies do when they've decided not to betray anyone that evening. Lila exhaled and then smiled in the way women do when they have decided to pass a test they weren't told was coming. Mom, Ethan said as he opened the car door for me, what happens now? Now, I said, we mop on Thursday. We go to court when we must. We make muffins for third graders who will plant flowers at a cabin that has a purpose. We keep letters. We keep lines. We wait for the last gust. What last gust? He asked. The one that arrives when people who rely on pressure realize it stopped working, I said. Sometimes they try one more lever, the one they think we didn't see. And then we show them we saw it 2 weeks ago. He grinned. Do we have the lever? We have the lever, I said. It's labeled Audit Trail. Because in a folder Mara had labeled with a quiet smile, we had the emails from Pike to June's friend, we had the clip of dusk, we had the letter from the mother-in-law, and we had, this is what makes campaigns fail, the invoice Pike mistakenly sent to the wrong June. It arrived in my inbox because she still uses the address I made for her when she couldn't figure out how to create one without including her birth year in the name. It listed consultation, family asset consolidation strategy, draft, easement notice, and site visit, after hours. It had a number at the bottom that didn't match the value of a conscience. We would send that invoice, with all the rest, to the bar committee if he so much as breathed near my porch again. We would, if we had to, send it to a judge with a cover letter that used the words pattern and purpose. We would, if necessary, read it out loud at church and then pass the muffins.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye!